Would you like to introduce yourself and your relationship and the history of the post-punk genre?
Hi, I'm Steve. As you know, I work in the dirt shop. Just before I was basically worked in support work, stroke mental health, and before that I had I run an agency for mainly old punk bands like UK Subs, 999, Vibrators, sort of stuff that I grew up with and loved.
Yeah.
And it's sort of come, and I'm now in the shop, and I'm sort of semi-retired now, but it's very comfortable working in that shop. Yeah.
So who are your sort of favourite punk bands? When I say punk bands or post-punk bands, who comes to mind immediately?
Post-punk, well, we've been listening to the Gang of Four today. I totally love. I've rediscovered them. It's quite hard to say the term post-punk.
Yeah.
Some people say it's CC and the Banshees, but then you could argue they were one of the first punk bands. They formed in '76. Sid Vicious played drums, and they just got up there and done it, which is kind of a punk ethic, if you like. Just got up there and played.
I think the ones that come to mind for me are your Joy Division and Wire.
Oh well, Wire also very very early. They were around in '76, so I think there was bands at that time that would become more defined as post-punk, but they were there in the start, you know.
So obviously one of the most important areas that I'm looking at for my dissertation is the 1979 Rock Against Racism.
Right. The one I went to was in Brockwell Park, and that was I think it was Aswad, Little Fingers, and Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
And I remember being in Cambridge and going up on the bus to that, and we marched through. I think we met up in Hyde Park. And then we marched all the way to Brixton, and that was one of the earliest Little Fingers shows I went to.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, Ali McMorley from Little Fingers lives in Norwich, and he often walks up and down here. So.
That's amazing. So what do you think the spark for like a movement like Rock Against Racism was?
Well,
politically and socially at the time.
Yeah, basically, from what I remember, is there was a lot of there was sort of mass unemployment around 76, 77. It was bad, and you also had a lot of rubbish on the road, and that at that time the National Front built up, and it was run by a really fat, horrible bastard called Martin Webster. And from what I can remember, and you may have to research this, which I'm sure you will. There was a reaction to this, but the National Front was really quite extreme. But as you'll find into the 80s, you have splinter groups like Combat 18 and things like that. But from what I remember is they were calling from the stage. They were calling people to go to Brick Lane and actually physically fight. The fascists at that time,
and from
which if you go back and study this, the Mosley's black shirts, and they were basically fought a battle in the East End, and they got battered, and that was the end of them.
From what I've read from my research in Rock Against Racism concerts, it's widely known that they were kind of the reason they sought to destroy the National Front, and they were responsible for the deterioration of the National Front.
But whenever you get, as you'll probably know, and it sort of worries me at the moment, is whenever you get like low employment, it's when the right wing seize on that and start blaming it on immigration. And it's just completely unfair and unreasonable, nasty, and people have people got to look after each other and tolerate each other.
Obviously the political climate has really changed since the 1970s, but in some ways there's a continuation of the same racial issues and the same social issues.
There always will be, I think. But it's I mean. What can I say? I kind of grew up in King's Lynn, and I'm really quite astonished how even people I know, a lot of people I know, think you know, they're quite racist, and it's like they're almost scared of different people come, you know, say King's Lynn. There's not an awful, it's mainly white.
Yeah.
But now that they've had an influx of Polish people, and that seems to be going all right, but you've still got all these kind of village idiot kind of crap, like, oh, there's too many foreigners are taking English jobs and all that. But the whole thing about the 50s was they all came over from Jamaica and places like that to do all the jobs that English people did, and they worked on the buses and they worked on the underground at night and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
in some ways, we've kind of seen the National Front shapeshift into different organisations.
Yeah,
You've had the BNP, you've had UKIP, and I guess most recently you've had Reform UK.
but they're coming across as a credible political party. But when their meetings have been stopped, which I'm pleased about. You know?
Yeah. So I suppose in this age, it's kind of important to think, what would stop something like Rock Against Racism happening again? What do you think has changed so that we, you know, that we
Well,
can
it could
have
happen
something
again, and
similar?
I hope it does.
Yeah.
I hope it does.
And I guess is being the opposition, or I guess being against all this, you know, outside of racist politics, is the opposition still possible beyond protest songs and you know,
It can be.
political music?
I think it can be done in numbers.
Yeah.
When I first came to Norwich, and I think it was 2011, I think maybe towards the end of the year, the EDL had a march.
Yeah.
But they were completely outnumbered, and people amassed, and they had police protection.
Yeah.
But they were throwing like cans of full beer. One of them missed me and hit some woman with her child.
Yeah.
But the police did nothing.
Yeah.
They just like this, you know, and stuff was going overhead, and there was a few fights and stuff, but that was it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.